welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 181st edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 636th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, August 6, 2020. I am your host, Brian Tonsoni. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred early this week when Indiana University Athletics announced its decision to join Open Doors Ready, the name, image, and likeness readiness program for Indiana athletes. What this program does is provide resources for the athletes to understand and use social media and other media to build their personal brand. Why this is a banner moment? 3 reasons. It is, number one, good for the student athlete to be connected with the tools that can help them take advantage of the name, image, and likeness ruling and build their brand and earn some money that they deserve. Number 2, it's good for Indiana to get ahead of the process and connect student athletes with such resources so that they are learning proper ways, and Indiana can be a part of that in helping the athlete do things correctly and grow their brand. And number 3, it's good for Indiana because they can promote this to their student athletes as a benefit for attending Indiana University. Indiana continues to be on the cutting edge of the athlete-first movement in college sports. That is something that I, as an alum, can be proud of, and it can only continue to help in recruiting pitches to high school athletes, students, and parents. Okay, let me now introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he has the second greatest beard in the history of this show, and his number one life goal is to have a pizza delivered to the door behind Andy Bottoms during a live broadcast of the Assembly Call. He, Chad Schwarzkopf, a.k.a. Chat Mob Chad, a.k.a. General Chadwick. Chad, what stood out from you from the past week in IU basketball news?
Well, first of all, obviously my beard is not ready to show right now. This is more of the COVID summer cut.
I was going to say, how long has it been gone?
Well, it's the COVID thing. The mask, it doesn't work. It goes against it. It feels
trust
weird.
me, I know. I'm aware.
But yeah, it's more the summer cut too as well. I do that. And by the way, Andy Bottoms, it is coming. The pizza is coming. I will tell everyone I do have the address. I do know where he lives. So I've figured that out and it will happen. But yeah, hey, as Coach said, that 8-and-8 image likeness situation going on is great. Getting ahead of the curve, get the students educated on this thing. I mean, it's never seemed closer for college athletes than it is right now to this actually happening and becoming a reality for these guys, and long overdue, and something that needs to happen. And it's a recruiting tool to be able to say, we've got this program, we're ready for you guys. You've got the great media school that can help out in partnership with this. Galen probably saw this announcement and just was wringing his hands to get in there and stuff. I'm sure he'll be closer with the team and be able to talk to those guys and give his insight as well. But it's fantastic. These guys get a chance to get a heads up in a society and world that is so social media, and your image is such a big thing, more than it ever has been for athletes at this amateur college level, and continue on and espouse the great values and stuff that the campus can apply to these students. And it's just great training instead of throwing them into the fray right as soon as they get out of there and having to find an agent and a media person and all that. You're already kind of getting your toes wet in a way before you get out into the real world. So just a fantastic step, and one that will get them ready for the next step.
And to my right,
analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
Ryan, what is your rant on the last week in IU basketball, or a rant on anything sports related, life related? in the midst of this
Well,
ongoing pandemic.
I would just talk about Fernando Tatis Jr., but I think this audience just doesn't want to hear it. They can follow my Twitter for that. No, I think that it was a really momentous week in college sports as the Pac-12 and the Big Ten had players band together and make demands for better conditions for themselves. And what I think that these players are finally realizing is how much depends on them. And I've heard a lot of people say that, well, if the players opt out, they'll just find other players. It's like, well, if Trevor Lawrence opts out, watching Clemson isn't going to be the same, especially if his entire defensive line and the linebackers and his receivers. And so, I mean, this whole idea that the players don't have as much power as they think they do. They do, because without them, there's a lot of people that would be out of jobs. There's a lot of money that wouldn't be flashing around that that many people in charge have gotten used to. And so I think that it's a couple of years ago, players tried to unionize. That was slapped down. But I think this just players on their own from rival teams, getting together and saying, hey, we all deserve better treatment. We all deserve, when we have medical issues that stem from our playing days, we shouldn't have to pay for those if the doctor you hired screwed up. We shouldn't have to, go hungry some nights because we're only provided one meal a day. We should have more access. We should have this. We should have that. I mean, there's plenty more that can be done for these players to help them, especially because there's a lot of people getting fat off that trough. And I've heard people say, well, athletic departments, a lot of them don't turn a profit. Yeah, well, if you're paying your coach $3.5 million a year and you're paying the athletic director a few $1 million a year and you cut back on that, maybe you would make some money. And these players are getting scholarships. They are getting some value out of this, but they also have the ability to dictate some terms to make their conditions better if they feel like they're being sold short. And quite frankly, I'm proud of the players for doing that because the only leverage they have is to threaten a boycott. That's the only leverage they have in this situation, is to threaten to sit out. And if they feel like the coronavirus protection protocols aren't enough, if they feel like, they're not being treated well, they're not taken care of well enough, they need to do something about it. And I was encouraged to see them do that. Now, are they going to get everything they want? And should they get every single thing they wanted? No, it needs to be a negotiation and a dialogue, which is why they should have lawyers on their side. And it should be there can be an accommodation here. And I think we should all, frankly, as fans of college basketball, be siding on the side of the players that we all watch and cheer for. We need to cheer for them, not just when they're on TV. We need to be their cheerleaders when they're going to class and when they're at home and when they're everywhere. Because without them, we wouldn't have the game that we love and the sports that we love and the teams that we love. So I think we need to be on the side of the players here, hoping for better treatment. As you mentioned, Brian, Indiana has been at the forefront of making things better for players. They're one of the schools that has done that. The rest of the nation needs to get on board because a lot of the rest of the country is not as good as Indiana is at treating these people the right way.
Yeah, what is it, 24 Sports, one team started out with Fred Glass, the name, image, likeness stuff that Chad talked about, and then this the Big Ten United, the Pac-12 stuff. Indiana's been there, and it's just been nice to see because the athletes do a lot for the university. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about this week. We have some Hoosier headlines, and then we're going to talk Big Ten news and a few burning Big Ten questions as we learn some players leaving and some players coming back in the Big Ten. And as usual, we'll take your questions in segment 3. All of that is coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. But before we get to all of that, a quick announcement. Please continue to support our friends at Homefield Apparel. You can find them at homefieldapparel.com. Chad's wearing one of their IU design shirts. Homefieldapparel.com/assembly20. Go get your IU gear, but also look at their big release Saturday. They are connecting with schools and getting licensed from some big Power 5 schools and putting out some really good retro designs that if you collect collegiate gear like I do, it's kind of hard not to hit that PayPal button every so often. But check them out. They do a good job. They support us, and they support the people around them. The Hoosier headlines for the week. We've talked a lot about the name, image, likeness rules. That was announced earlier. Trace Jackson Davis was listed as number 45 in ESPN's 2021 mock draft. NCAA has commented saying it's still planning on college hoop season beginning on November 10th. And as Ryan mentioned in his rant, the Big Ten United is players getting together and requiring some better treatment for their protocols for COVID. And if you follow Indiana athletics, there's a tough story about a football player who had COVID and is now negative, but also has had some heart issues and some blood issues as a result of COVID, and his start of the season has been delayed. So they're fighting for that. And guys, anything that on that list that you haven't talked about that you'd like to as far as Hoosier headlines?
I'd like to mention the Trace thing for a little bit there. I mean, we talked about his level being at 45 and the big presser that we had where coach talked and a couple of the players talked and everything. We got a little insight into what Trace Jackson Davis has been working with and dealing with in the offseason, and it's been a lot of shooting. And we've all been saying that this past season and been saying that that's what he needs to do to elevate his game. And that's something that he could bring to the table and bring that number up even higher than it is. In the NBA, just in past IU alums, we're seeing big guys shooting well. Thomas Bryant, if you've seen any of the highlights of him playing recently, he's got a pretty decent corner three. I know Ryan would probably have some things to say about that shot form that he has. It's not the prettiest looking shot if you've seen some of the highlights. But
it's tough for big guys to have good shot form a lot of times.
Oh yeah, it looks almost like a little kid, almost like he's shoveling it from his chest, from what I could see. But anyways, yeah, that's good news for him that he's working on that and he's figured that's something that he needs to get better at, and we're seeing that in dividends of guys, at least alumni that we know, turning that around. So exciting to see.
Trace Jackson Davis was mentioned by some of his teammates as working on his right hand and working on his jump shot. So he knows those things that he's got to really work on to move up that number. And it sounds like he's putting time in already.
Yeah. And we talked about that last year about how he needed to be able to, even if he wasn't hitting threes, he needed to show he could step out to 15 feet and hit a jumper. And he did a couple times, but consistently be able to do that for his next level prospects. Cause a guy at 6'9" in the NBA has to be able to make shots. You just have to. And even Zion Williamson will step out and hit shots occasionally when he's not lumbering down the floor. But I think that you look at what he can do with the rest of his game. He did need to work on his right hand. Coach, you mentioned that a lot last year, that he always went to the left, even when he was on the right block. You know, he was going to the left, finding ways to do it. And I think that if he can turn both ways, it changes who he can be as a player. I mean, let's face it. I'm fine if he just dunks every time, but you need to be able to work both hands. You need to have more the touch around the basket, and having a shot from the perimeter does help your touch around the basket. You're used to feathering the ball as opposed to just being forceful with it. So I think that all of that helps him be a better player, helps him be a more attractive prospect. And if he is better this year and a more attractive prospect for the NBA, I know a lot of IU fans. I mean, you want the IU guys to do well, but you don't really care what he's like as a prospect. He's going to make the NBA. But if he's better as a prospect, that's better for the program. That's better for Indiana. And speaking of the NBA, though, I do want to plug something from our website, from the Big Lead. One of our writers wrote about Romeo Langford, and he's a Celtics fan, and he desperately wants Romeo to get more minutes. Go read that piece. It's really good, by Liam McKeown on our site. And it's true. Romeo has earned more playing time, and Romeo's a guy who had a lot to work on when he hit the NBA, just like Trace does. And, after his freshman year, I mean, he had a lot to work on, and he's gotten a lot better. He's a really good player right now, and the Celtics should be playing him more.
Chad, I'm going to come to you in just a second. And Romeo is playing defense, which he struggled a little bit to do. And one of the things I think Trace Jackson Davis has to do to move up that draft list is to be able to guard out in the perimeter, too, because at 6'9", you're not just going to guard the center, and the center in the NBA is somewhat gone anyway. You got to guard pick and rolls and do those types of things. So, that shows right there, as Romeo's playing better defense, he might be getting more minutes. As Trace Jackson Davis plays better defense, Indiana's going to be better defensively, then his stock's going to go up. Chad, you had something to say about
just
Trace.
To say, equally what you were saying as well with Trace getting better, gets the team better this year. If Trace develops even a 10-foot jump shot that the opponent's defense has to honor, that's going to open up some great lanes for especially when we go smaller with Hunter in there diving to the basket on a pass, or
Lander, Fennessy driving and everything. If he can just step out a little bit and make his player have to hesitate and honor that just the slightest bit, it opens up so much more than them just having to sit at home knowing, oh, I only have to be out there enough to get my arm on him to disrupt him receiving the ball. Now I've got to be ready to get up there and get my hand up even higher and block a shot. That's a lot better.
And you're pulling a rebounder away from the inside, even if you miss those shots. You know, if the guy respects your shot enough that he has to come out and guard you, that opens up, as you said, a lot of possibilities all over the place. And it opens up driving lanes if you step to the free throw line and guys want to cut baseline, and drive baseline. So it has effects for the whole team, not just Trace's prospects. So we should be, that's the thing is Again, I have some friends who don't care about the NBA. They don't care about it at all. They wish the IU guys well. They don't care about the NBA, though. They want the guys to be good when they're in Indiana. Well, guess what? Trace becomes a better prospect when Romeo was a good prospect. When any of these guys are a good prospect to get better, it's better for Indiana as a program. And by the way, it's great for recruiting to be able to say that, oh, yeah, look how much better Trace got from year 1 to year 2, and look where he ended up in the NBA draft. We can do that for you. It all ties into being better for the program when these kids develop and get better and get to the next level.
Okay, coming up, the deadline came and went for college hoops players to decide if they're staying in school or heading to the NBA. Several notable Big Ten players chose to stay. How will that impact the conference next season? Stick with us.
Hi, this is Jawan Morgan. What's the only thing better than getting IU's first triple-double in 47 years? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcast or watch these replays and see all the between-segment banner, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni, here with the shot doctor, Ryan Phillips, and Chad Schwartzkopf. And we're going to talk Big Ten. A little bit of a tease when Andy returns. The full Big Ten preview will come from the world-renowned bracketologist, and he'll let you know all the stuff that we don't know about the Big Ten, but we'll give you a little bit of a head start on that. So recent news, Luka Garza of Iowa returning. Illinois has two key guys that announced that they're coming back in Ayo Dosunmo and Kofi Coburn. Michigan State lost Xavier Tillman, but Aaron Henry did decide to return for the Spartans. Caleb Wesson had already announced that he was leaving Ohio State. Marcus Carr is back. Daniel Otero is gone for Minnesota. If I missed someone there, Google who stayed and who went, and you'll find out. But those were the big decisions. So, guys, the current odds have Iowa set at 15-2 to win the national title, but they're going to have to play some defense. I'll leave out Jared's commentary in the run sheet. Indiana was 7th in the Big Ten at 40-1. So if you're a wagering type, put down a few dollars, and when Indiana wins its 6th banner, you also get some cash. But anyway, we'll go to which team do you think is the most? Let's just go overhyped and underhyped. Which teams do you think are projected high that might fall back a little bit? Which teams do you think don't get the credit that they deserve? Ryan, we'll start with you. Any teams stand out in that area?
Well, I won't even talk about whether or not they're overhyped or under. Well, I'll say they're maybe a little overhyped, but I'm not sure if they're going to fall back too far. It's Iowa. Garza coming back. You've got Wieskamp. Frederick can shoot the lights out. Bohannon, we're assuming he's going to be back healthy. IU fans know him too well. I can't stand him, in case you couldn't remember. But they've got a team of really good players, but at the same time, they don't play defense, and that's going to cost them in big games. So when I see them as the expected favorite, they tend to fade late. McCaffrey's teams tend to fade late. So I think that I think people are overhyping them. So I think they're overhyped, underhyped. Maybe I don't know if they're underhyped, but I just think that Illinois, while some are picking them as the favorite, I think that people are underestimating how good they can be, given Dosunmo coming back, given Kofi Coburn coming back. That's two guys who could be first team All Big Ten. I mean, legitimately. And then they've got some solid young pieces coming in that can fill roles as well. That team, when it's at its best, may be the best team in the Big Ten. Then again, if you can do something to stop one of their two big guys and slow one of them down, you might be able to beat him. But at the same time, Dosunmo's a guy who will just dagger you constantly. He steps up in big moments and make big plays, and it's so hard to defend him. And like everybody in the Big Ten's heart dropped a little when he decided he was coming back, because he is so tough to beat. I hate praising an opponent, like a semi-rival there, but he's good, and you got to give it to him. And he's tough to beat, and he's tough to guard for anybody, even the best defenders. It's tough to guard him, and he hits shots at weird angles, and so it's not traditional. It's not, if you do this, he won't make the shot. That it doesn't apply to him. There's some people that doesn't apply to, and it's him. So overhyped. I think Wisconsin's a little overhyped. If I had to pick an overhyped team, I think Wisconsin's a little overhyped. I think there's a ceiling on that team, just because of their lack of, they do what they do, and they'll always be in it. But I don't think they're among the favorites right now.
Chad, you're any team overhyped or underhyped that hits you right away from the guys coming back?
I think with the guys coming back, Michigan State, as we kind of talked a little bit, always seems to get things together. But when you look at their stats last year, Cassius was the leader in points, assists, and steals, and then Tillman, their rock mature player as well, was the leader in rebounds and blocks. So there you lose two key players. Now, Henry has a chance to step up, and there's a big shoes that he has to step up and perform to. And he did pretty well last year. He was right behind those two players as one of the lead contributors for the team. Now, can he continue that and step into that role and ready for that spotlight? He's probably ready to get going, but we got to see good leadership. Who's going to step up and be that leader? Because when Winston leaves, that's a huge ball handler. That's a huge leader. That's a huge rock. Kind of akin to the way IU players, how we felt when Yogi left. You had a rock in Yogi that handled the ball and kind of generaled the team for you, and then you lost him, and you're like, oh no. So I'm sure that's a little bit of what Michigan State fans are going through right now. I would almost note
it's worth noting that Winston was the rare guy who's a leader for 4 years. It wasn't like he took over as a leader as a junior, as it usually happens. He was, from day one, he was there. He was a leader.
Yeah, and so that's tough to deal with. And I honestly, I would almost put two words, depending on both those words, overhyped and underhyped, to even IU. IU's got on that discussion bubble in both ways. I think that's why we kind of sit firmly expectation wise in that large bubble that is the middle of the Big Ten this year, where if things go right, we could see us sneaking up towards that 3, 4, maybe even second position in the Big Ten, maybe even higher. But if things don't fall like they could, and we fall apart, or injuries rear their heads like karma tends to with IU, knock on wood. Do I have any here? Then things could go south for us pretty quickly. But yeah, I think those are the teams that you kind of know what's going to happen, and everyone else just going to kind of be in that battleground middle of the Big Ten like we saw last year.
Iowa thick middle.
Yeah, Iowa being overhyped. They may turn out to be the best team, but they've had a run here where they've won some games late. With some comebacks. I think 2 years ago, Bohannon hit 3 threes late to win a game on the road at Rutgers. That's water finds its level at times within programs. And you can only go so long outscoring people before that comes back to bite you. And that usually comes back to bite you in postseason play. If you can't guard as the opponents get tougher in the NCAA tournament. So that I agree with that. I do think that the impressive thing with Illinois is that Coach Underwood changed the way he played defense after the first 2 years, from an all-out pressure, trying to get steals, and that havoc that he had at SF Austin where was he at? Then at Oklahoma State. But he really forced things to more of a pack line defense. I know everyone gives Archie some crap at times. Is a pack line the best defense? Well, what he did is he just allowed the ball to go to the middle where you had Coburn, the 7-2 guy, where you can just, you had a rim protector and a shot blocker back there. And
that covers up a lot of errors.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. So I think they got better defensively. That's the other thing was so impressive about Illinois. And Illinois won on the road last year. So if they can continue that, that's where sometimes I think the difference is in where can you get your wins. That's something that Rutgers might be a little bit overhyped. I love Geo Baker, another closer, another guy who just has ice water in his veins. I like watching him play. Ron Harper Jr.
Hate playing those guys. Those guys.
Those are tough games, and I think Rutgers is going to have a decent season. But Rutgers, like Indiana, has got to win on the road. So everyone else, I've seen Rutgers as high as 3rd or 4th in some people's listing and tiering of the Big Ten. I think that's just a little overhyped until they prove they can do that consistently. They're going to be in the mix in that tough middle that we've been talking about. Michigan State will be interesting because it can. We'll talk Rocket Watts here. Can he assume some of that leadership that Cassius Winston had? But Tom Izzo is just such a good coach, whether you like him or not, and it's either love him or hate him based on how he runs his program. But I think he gets the most out of his guys, and so I think they're going to be there. And I will say this, and we might disagree, but overhyped Ohio State. They had one good year with Bates Diop, and then they've been just one game ahead of IU with a guy like Caleb Wesson, and then he's gone. I think they're overhyped a little bit, and it'll drop down, although Holtman does a good job. And I think Michigan's going to be better than some people think, even though they lost a couple of really good recruits to another school and also to the G League.
Well, and remember, Ohio State lost DJ Carton too, and they were banking a lot on him. And while he only played 20 games, he averaged 10.4 points as a freshman. So that's a talented kid you lost to transfer. What I will say about Iowa, and you mentioned it early, Coach, about in your monologue there about the ability to guard. There's going to be a night where you don't hit shots,
right? And
you've got to be able to compensate for that by being versatile and playing defense, or pounding the post or something. There are going to be games where advantage you. The perfect example that I always go back to is the Virginia game where they were the 1 seed and lost to the 16. There are going to be nights where things do not go your way and you have to change what you're doing. And Iowa seems very one note: up-tempo offense, shoot threes, try and get the other team running. There's going to be a night where they're going to have to win by scoring 60 points. And can they do that? I don't have a whole lot of faith that they can. I feel like Illinois can win a lot of different ways. I feel like even Wisconsin, they're built to do one thing, and I think they are overhyped, but I also have faith that they play good enough defense that they can force teams to keep that, so they don't have to outscore teams by scoring 80 points. But Iowa, I just don't feel like – I feel like the game has to go perfect for them to win, or at least go exactly the way they want to.
The key to beating Wisconsin is to run on Wisconsin, but Wisconsin plays defense. So Wisconsin keeps the pace down by their defense, their defensive pace, which makes it tough.
And that's something they can control by getting back
by
on
playing defense. That's something that Iowa
can
does.
always control that.
Iowa doesn't.
I feel like it's at the mercy of opponents.
Yeah.
Well, mercy at opponents, and you've got an Achilles heel in that you've got one star you depend on too much, and something happens to him, or a team game plans and shuts him down, and you're in trouble. Or you have a bad defensive game, and you make a Purdue team look like they're the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So those some overhyped and underhyped teams, but Luka Garza is coming back, and who do you think is the number one challenger for Player of the Year in the Big Ten? Does Trace Jackson Davis have a shot at it, Ryan?
I think he's on the short list. Sure. I said during the break, I think Ayo Dosunmo is going to be while Garza is of course the favorite because he's coming back and he's going to put up huge numbers. I think Dosunmo does enough on both ends. And if Illinois is really good, it's going to depend a lot also on where they finish. If Illinois is number one, Ayo's probably Player of the Year. So I think that you've got him. Marcus Carr is probably in the mix. How is Aaron Henry going to be? He could be up there. And of course, Trace Jackson Davis is on that short list. If Indiana is a top 4 team and his numbers go up and he's pounding double doubles every game or every other game or so, he's probably in the mix for sure. And I also think Trace, the added value he has against somebody like Garza is that he plays defense. And if his blocks numbers are huge, and if he, if the advanced statistics say he's much better defensively this year. I thought they were unfair to him a little bit last year, as we've discussed on other shows. But if, his numbers are up this year, it's going to be he's going to have a good argument. And so, yeah, I would say Ayo is the number one challenger there. Aaron Henry, because there's always a Michigan State guy in the mix. If he steps up, Marcus Carr and Trace would be the guys.
Chad, your thoughts on who might give Luka Garza a run for his money and Conference Player of the Year?
I agree that Ayo definitely has the one that's the best challenge, but I think the grade is it's graded on a different curve. I think Ayo's got a tougher battle to win that kind of thing in his position.
Everything.
Yeah. And whereas Luka Garza, when you have a big man that can do what he can do, it seems like a bigger thing when it's a big man can do what Luka Garza does than when you have a player like Ayo. Ayo has to go a little bit farther beyond the bar that I think Garza has to overcome to achieve that. But I think that's in Trace's favor as well. And again, I think the big men have a higher chance or a better chance of becoming conference players than you do the flashy guards, because that's something that you're used to seeing is what the guards do. But when big guys do something out of the norm, then it gets a lot more attention.
I've already mentioned this guy. I don't think he's Player of the Year. He would have to have an outstanding year. But Geo Baker, if Rutgers was the top one or two, and he really exploded. But boy, he's fun to watch as a closer. And unfortunately, I'm not a big Iowa fan. I do respect some of the Big Ten schools, but I don't really respect Iowa. Sorry to any graduates out there listening, but Bohannon, the way he hits clutch shots is something you got to admire, unless he's playing your team.
Worst. He's the worst.
But
well, actually, no, the what's his name? The guy from Wisconsin who takes fake charges.
Davidson.
Davidson. Yeah.
Davidson. That's the guy you don't like. That you don't like unless he's on your team, right?
No, I'd still hate him. He was whacking guys in the junk, Coach. You don't like that guy even if he's on your team.
No, there's no place for that. And really, Wisconsin. I'm ready to see them have a struggle year. They've had their run, and I think they need to go. Let's talk a little bit about your thoughts about Michigan State. We've talked about them. They lose Cassius and Tillman. They do have Rocket Watts and Henry back, and always have good recruits coming in. Do they make the top four in the Big Ten? Chad, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on Michigan State? I know you think that they're going to be down a little bit. Talking off air.
I mean, Izzo's a great coach. I mean, they've got the bulldog of an assistant in Dane Fife, so they'll fight through it, and they'll get a game plan going around who they have there, and they'll figure it out. But again, to me, it is about where their leadership comes from, who steps into that role. Because again, as we already stressed, a huge hole left in leadership when you have a guy that handles the ball for you and brings it up the court for 4 years in such a great way. And then you lose that, and the window and door is open again for someone to step up and do that. But it may be trouble this year that they may. I see them more sitting around the 5 this year in the Big Ten, 5, 6, but could turn a big curve the following year.
It's worth remembering too, Michigan State gets Joey Hauser this year.
True.
He's 6'9" guy who's versatile, hit 42.5% of his 3-pointers at Marquette. I mean, he and his brother both transferred away from Marquette. They're good players. And I think that he's going to be a key for them. He's going to start from day one. Gabe Brown's a pretty good player as well. He can hit some shots and makes all of his free throws. And, he's one of those guys who could, now that the spotlight is more on him and they need to make him better. I think that he could be a guy that could really step up. Rocket Watts is, I think, a big key, but Tom Izzo has a great track record with point guards. I mean, so it's they just seem to replace those leader type guys one after the other and stack them. So I have faith that he's going to be a good player. He won't. I mean, will he be Cassius Winston? Probably not, but he's going to be a good player, I think, and it's easy to see that watching him play a little bit last year. But yeah. Hauser, Gabe Brown, and Rocket Watts, I mean, those guys all, if they step up, Michigan State's going to be good again. And Michigan State's always tough to play. Even if they're not having a good year, they're tough to play. They just are. Their style is bruising. It wears guys out. They're tough to beat when they're playing at home, no matter who's on the floor. So you feel like they're going to be good. They'll be top 6 because they always are. And, of course, 1 or 2 wins go their way. they can move up into that top 4, top 3.
Michigan State, the questions for me with Michigan State is, can Rocket Watts or whoever handles the point execute the pick and roll like Cassius did? Because that makes so many other players better. When you can come off that and you draw so much attention, then you're playing 4-on-3. And the rebounding, can they stay physical, like you said? Every year it seems like they find some big guys that can throw in there. But last year, other than Tillman, they had some big guys, but were more thin at the 4 and at the 3. And so can they maintain that physical presence? And Izzo's track record is yes and yes. He'll turn Rocket Watts into a competent off-the-ball screen, or maybe they'll go to some other offense that uses Rocket Watts' strengths if he's not a screen and roll guy. But those are the two things that they really did well the last 2 years, where Gabe Brown and Henry and everyone could shoot because Cassius was just going downhill. It's why Indiana beat them, because they stopped him.
We got their number last year. More specifically, Rob Fennessy had their number last year. And once he was able to guard and shut down Cassius Winston, then they had nothing after that, beyond that. And once Watts got in there, it was a relief getting Cassius off the court. And that's why, again, I'm leaning more towards them having a falling off year this year, because once you shut down those big guys last year, like we were able to, and the year before that, they were very beatable. So yeah, unless those pieces can step up and like you said, Izzo can shift around some things, and find a new game plan. I don't see them being as high as they could be.
Last question here for the segment. If we were coaches with a guy like Luka Garza, and you have some other players around him that are capable, do you focus your defense on him not scoring and try to limit his points and send doubles or whatever you have to do that? Or do you allow Luka Garza to get his points, play him, and shut down the other players so you only have one player go off or not? Chad, real quick as we're into the segment, your thoughts on how you would guard Luka Garza, the returning potential player of the year?
Just 2 words: Race Thompson.
there you go.
Run him at him. Do it. Go get him.
Be physical with him, though. I do think you can be physical. He's not. He's got that nice spin move, though, that really, against pressure. But
on Garza, I would double the post when he's in there, but I'm not running doubles at him on the floor. You know what? Make him beat you. Or make everybody else beat you, and just let him he's going to get his points. He's going to get over 20 in a game. I think in the post you can double him, though, so he doesn't set guys up as well. You force him to pass the ball quicker, force him to fight through it a little. You might even do something where when he's out on the perimeter, you put a different player on him than you would in the post. You can rotate a little bit there.
How is his passing out of the post? I don't even remember that too well.
He's decent. He's not a wizard with it. He's not like Nikola Jokic or anything like that, but he's okay. He's pretty good. He can find guys. But I think that if you pressure him and force him to maybe not look across court and have to focus on the same side, he might not be as good at it.
Last year, I think Indiana just let him get his points. I think he ended up with 40-some points, but Indiana got the win. I know there were some other players that the Frederick guy went out early in the first half, but I think Archie's was, we're going to let him go and make sure the other guys, because they're so deadly from 3-point range that if you do double
the best shooting team in the conference,
and you kick it out and they get a wide open 3, that's a dagger. I would take Garza 2s every possession, then Bohannon 3s and Frederick 3s. But when you have when you have a player of the year and a top guy like that, you send your defense towards that guy. But Iowa is an interesting team.
Garza had 38 against Indiana last year and 8 rebounds. Indiana scored 89 points in that game, though. I mean, that just shows the problem with Iowa is they give up too much. And Garza's a terrible defender as well, and you can go right at him.
Yeah,
he did have 4 blocks in that game, but blocks aren't indicative of great defense necessarily.
No. So there you have it. We like Illinois maybe and down on some others. But coming up in our third segment, we'll answer your questions. Stick with us here on Assembly Call to find out our responses to those questions.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of The Assembly Call.
Welcome back to The Assembly Call. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni, here with the shot doctor, Ryan Phillips and Chad Schwarzkopf. Remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup even during the offseason, and after every game we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. It's now time for our mailbag. All questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community. That can be found at assemblycall.com/community. And we're going to talk a little bit about the possibility of playing basketball here in the middle of this pandemic. And Jack first asked, what do we need to do to help the possibility of NCAA basketball this year? I'll take that one, guys. I think simply it is to social distance and mask up and do what you have to do. But assume that it could be spread. And if everyone does that, then maybe this thing dies down a little bit or a lot. And we get to a point where there don't need to be major changes in athletics or schools or work or anything like that. So I think masking up is important. Everyone doing their duty. I know there are differences of opinions on that. I just simply don't understand that. It's about teamwork. And Jack, I think we all need to be part of the team. If we want Indiana basketball and Indiana sports, wear a mask. It's simple as that. If you don't want it, then don't. Stephen asked, how would you run a Big Ten bubble if you were a commissioner? Jeff Goodman had tweeted earlier that the Big East and the Big Ten are two conferences that have discussed using a bubble for basketball this season per sources. So, Ryan, your thoughts on how a bubble might work in Big Ten or college basketball?
Yeah, I think you would have to do what was sort of like a semi-bubble where each team was bubbled on their campus as opposed to moving everybody to one city and bubbling, because that would feel almost like they were professional athletes. And, of course, as we all know, they're not professionals. They're just like every other student. So I would say, yeah, you could do it on campus, maybe have everybody live in the same building, isolate them from everybody. They just like the NBA, they go to practice together, they get tested all the time. I would say do class online, that kind of stuff. If you really want to do this, have the same protocols in place everywhere. Make sure there's a Big Ten hired compliance person to make sure living on campus, making sure that everything is being, sort of like an independent evaluator, making sure everything's being followed and the testing procedures are the same. Make sure every school is using the same version of the test, all of that stuff. You could do it. It might not be all in the same place in a bubble, but we've seen that bubbles in the NBA and NHL have been wildly successful, and it hasn't been penetrated by the virus yet. So that's clearly the way to do this. You've seen baseball struggle with it, not doing a bubble, and you could do sort of a semi-on-campus thing to make sure that you get this season in. And you'd also have to make sure that the players are on board for it. If you're not on board for strict protocol and strict procedures, you should opt out. I mean, you have that right. And players, by the way, who do opt out should absolutely be able to opt out and keep their scholarships. In my opinion, there is no question about that. That has not been blanket across the NCAA yet. It should be. I think that the NCAA has recommended that that's the case. I'm not sure if that's officially enforced yet, but those players should, A, they should keep their scholarships, and B, they should not lose a year of eligibility. In my opinion, if you're opting out, that should be the case.
And kudos to Coach Allen, who has said he's had lots of conversations with his football players, and no one has opted out from Indiana football yet. But Coach Allen seems to be caring about the person, and it goes back to what we started out, that Indiana is really a player-first university, and we would hope that they would honor any player who opted out. Chad, your ideas about bubbling college basketball?
Just echoing everything that Ryan said, but I think beyond that as well, I think each individual university is going to have in place a game plan for the visiting teams, a spot that they all stay, and then there needs to be testing that comes in to play for those teams as they come visit, provided by the home team university. That way you're not allowing these teams to come in and bring the disease with them into your bubble that you already have. So that's where I think the bubble situation works fantastic. Like Ryan said, on campus with athletes, especially in smaller number athletic sports like a basketball. The only big difficulty then is when you travel, how you keep within your bubble, and how you come in contact with other people's bubble. And if you have the right infrastructure, hotel or whatever it is, hotel bought out, hotel floor, whatever that situation is for the team, when you get to another university's campus, that's where it's going to become crucial, and where it's the highest chance for infection or a situation to go south is going to be in that.
If these leagues are talking about bubbles, I wonder if there might be multiple site bubbles where you have 3 cities or 4 cities, and you move Indiana, Purdue, Ohio State, 3 or 4 or 5 teams into one location, and they could play each other, and then you travel just to 2 or 3 different locations. I know that's probably a scheduling nightmare for where
Seems
to
be
stay.
Rutgers.
And yeah, and then the other issues are where are the facilities for these things? They're generally in your bigger cities where you're seeing bigger outbreaks. Marion County in Indiana is having one of the bigger areas of outbreaks. So are you going to be able to house people in downtown Indianapolis so that they can get on a bus and go to Lucas? They wouldn't host it at Lucas Oil, but they at Bankers Life. Those are questions that you have, and I'm sure that they're thinking ahead about trying to do that. But I do believe both of you are probably more correct than the 3 or 4 city bubble, that you got to create bubbles. And I think this is for any way of life, any business, any school. The more bubbles you can create, the lower numbers. That also helps get us back to regular life as sooner than if we just do things and massively open up. Any other thoughts, guys? We have about 2.5 minutes about the issues that we're facing in the pandemic and how Indiana's handling it, or what they might do to make sure we have sports.
I would just say support the players. Let the players lead to some degree on certain things. And if the players are saying, hey, we need better health care, we need to make sure that, our school has our health, our football coaches and all that have our health as the first priority, and we're not feeling that. Believe the players. If they say that, one team comes out and says, hey, our coach isn't taking this seriously and we feel like we're threatened here. Colorado State had a huge issue come out the other day where they had to shut down because of a bunch of positive coronavirus cases, and it turned out their coaches were telling players, don't report your symptoms because then you can't practice for 2 weeks. So if you are symptomatic or you think you have coronavirus, don't tell the trainers because they'll report you and you can't practice. And they were, reportedly, supposedly threatening players with their playing time if they had to sit out. And if that's happening, those players need to come forward and out those coaches and be like, hey, this is not right. This is about your health first and football second. Just like when you're at school, it's about your education first and football second. Those things need to be at the forefront right now. We need to believe players. We need to trust players. And we need to understand that when, it was like when Shabazz Napier a couple of years ago said, hey, a couple nights a week, I go to bed hungry because we're only allowed to eat so much. And that got huge national attention. And the NCAA changed its rules to allow the players to eat more. I mean, to have more snacks, it was, so they could eat something. I mean, these players are trying to tell us what the problems are, and we got to listen to them.
Chad, your last thoughts on how we're going to be able to see Indiana basketball play, bubble or other issues? And we got about 30 seconds.
Just to keep it on a positive note, the one thing I can say is that I have no complaints or arguments with how any of the IU coaching staff, the higher ups, the administration, and all those involved have handled this and taken care of this so far. They seem to be thinking of the players and the students and everything that's going on, and I'm happy with the job they've done so far.
I agree with you. Indiana seems to be on the forefront of doing this. They have players in mind first, and I think that will help the overall situation.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music you hear on the show, and thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then.
Take it from me, Yogi Ferrell. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Coach, one question I wanted to ask you,
Sure.
and this is also one that I wanted to ask when Andy was on as well. Ryan, obviously you can weigh in, but it's more of a bracketology thing. If basketball shifts to an all Big Ten, I have concerns for that because Big Ten doesn't really get respected as much in the college basketball landscape. I'm concerned about how that would how that would shape up for Indiana and teams that are in the middle without having those non-conference.
I think if you still have a selection committee and it's heavily based on record and all of the net figures, those types of things, you could see some loss of bids simply because you're going to have a team like Indiana that was 9-11. If they win 1 or 2 games in the Big Ten tournament, they're definitely in as a 9 or a 10 seed. Those kinds of teams may lose out if it's a traditional bracketology thing.
Yeah. Because you're going to artificially evaluate the conferences. You don't know which conference is better than which if they're not playing each other. Right?
Yes, and then you don't have the ACC Big Ten Challenge and those types of games to gauge which teams within the conference have played well to do traditional. The thing that I've heard, and I kind of like in this crazy one-year situation, is that based on bids in the previous seasons, the NCAA would then say every conference has this allotted number.
Your average over the last
6-7 years you get. So Big Ten might get 7 slots. And then the Big Ten would decide, okay, is that 1 through 7 in the regular season, or is that
6 and then the tournament champion?
If you get to the semifinals and then the next 4 highest teams that didn't make it to the semi. I mean, you could probably as a conference come up with a whole bunch of different scenarios.
Here's the way you do it and make it really easy. It's 6 and the conference champion. If the conference champion is one of the top 6, it goes to the 7th team.
Right.
So you'll have a team like Root. You know what I mean? Like
the 7th place team will be Rudy.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the simplest way to. They do that in European soccer too. If like a team wins one of their tournament champions, they can knock another team out that ranked ahead of them. It's a whole confusing thing, but you can get bumped out if it could be the thing where the top 7 teams, the 12th team makes a run in the Big Ten tournament and wins it, you knock the 7th team out. So
it's going to be real hard. And the conferences are you build the strength of schedule in the conference by beating teams from other conferences. And so then when Indiana goes 9-11, but they've won 9 really good against really good competition in the Big Ten and Big Ten strong. So it's going to be weird if they go to just the Big Ten.
We just need Ryan to never plan to go to the Maui Invitational ever again because clearly that cursed it.
God does not like me.
Clearly.
That hasn't officially been canceled yet. Has it?
Maui hasn't canceled yet.
True. They're waiting. I still think basketball people are still waiting to see what happens with football.
Yep.
That football's the guinea pig.
Well, it's funny because Hawaii has handled this as well as anybody. I mean, obviously it's easier because they're an island.
Right. But same with New Zealand. Everyone's praising New Zealand, but I'm like, they're an island. Of course. But
here's the thing: they do a ton of business with China, so it could have gotten really bad there if it was contained on the island and everybody got it. But no, they've handled it very well. They shut down. They did all the right things, and now they're sort of like they're in a place where a lot of their economy revolves around tourism, and they're kind of like. And for a long time, when you went there, you had to quarantine for 2 weeks before you could do anything. And so now they're kind of thinking about opening up, and it's going to be, if you want to create a basketball bubble, take them to Maui. They've got
that's what I just said. That's where the tournament is this year, maybe in Maui.
They have a ton of empty hotels because nobody's going. So,
yep, have it in Maui.
I just at the Lahaina Civic Center. That's smaller than my high school gym. It'd be great.
There was the other question about crowd and stuff, and I just hope that. If they don't have a crowd, please don't do what some of the soccer teams have done and pump in the crowd.
Yeah.
That's been
a light, like white noise, crowd noise in baseball that they've done in some places is actually pretty good because there's sort of it's a buzz. It's not like a,
soccer. They've tried too much in soccer where they've tried to bring it up and like during big moments, but they're like 3 seconds behind something big that happens. And
you're never going to be perfectly right. Yeah. No, that low tone buzz makes it so it's not echoey and weird. Mm-hmm. But if you leave that in and then maybe like, at the end you hit a half court shot, maybe you elevate it as they're going to the locker room, but not try and do it on every play,
In basketball, when we thought that the tournament was going to happen without fans, I was excited for that because you were going to hear all the chatter. You're going to hear the coaches more.
Yep.
You had to be quick on the ding button.
On the dump button. Yeah.
You have to be real quick when Izzo's yelling at Henry at the half court.
Yeah, well, the golf has been interesting because you never hear what those guys are talking about during their rounds. And today you heard Tiger and Rory were talking about baseball. They were like, Major League Baseball is going to have to shut down. We've never heard that before because there's always fans and the mics don't pick that stuff up. So
maybe a mirrored coverage on HBO or something that's rated R. So then you can,
that'd be awesome.
It's not going to be censored. You can hear all the cursing.
Or just like ESPN Plus, man. Let them go uncensored on ESPN Plus.
Just click this box as you go to it to say you're 18, over 18.
There you go. All right, guys.
All right.
Dinner time for me. Thanks for stepping in, Chad.
Yeah, no problem.
Always
every
pleasure,
time, guys.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Very good. Good conversation. Thanks, Chat Mob. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Yep. We'll see you.